I always go to my grandparents for the summer. It was domino night for them, so I was home alone. This time, it seemed more peaceful than usual. The only sound that filled my ears was the ticking of a nearby clock, counting off each second like drops of rain from a stormy sky. I felt safe in this momentary silence and solitude, but something about it made me uneasy, like a presence lingering just outside my awareness. As I moved through the house on my way upstairs, I could feel an invisible hand tugging at the back of my mind, an urge to explore further into these otherwise forgotten corners of the home. Something seemed almost alive within its walls, something dark and hidden away beneath years of dust and cobwebs. My heart raced faster as I reached the top floor, which had been locked for as long as I can remember. Its door remained tightly shut despite all the attempts to open it, until now. With trembling hands, I turned the knob, and it was unlocked. I entered with caution, not knowing what awaits on the other side. The air around me shifted suddenly, as if I was being pulled towards some unseen force deep within this unfamiliar space. A force that brought with it an unsettling chill down my spine. In front of me lay what appeared to be an old study filled with bookshelves, lined up against one wall, and several armchairs scattered around a desk covered in papers and artifacts from long ago. It's then that something caught my eye. A single photograph, tucked away among all these objects. Yet for some reason, instead of feeling scared or anxious like before, looking at this picture allowed me to find peace amidst all this chaos surrounding me. Slowly but surely, as time passed by, I began exploring further beyond what initially met the eye, until finally becoming fully immersed in unraveling every detail around me, while listening attentively to any hint or clue buried deep within these walls. Little did I know, however, that someone else had been observing silently ever since I unlocked those doors, watching intently. The door slammed. I ran over to open it, to no avail, pulling, and twisting, while I felt a heavy presence inch closer and closer behind me until the door budged and I finally escaped. I never mentioned anything to my grandparents about it, but from that day on, I was never alone in that house again. It all started so innocently. I'd heard about the new phenomena of air bed and breakfasts, where people could rent out their homes or apartments to complete strangers from around the world. It seemed like a great way to make extra money, so I decided to give it a try. Little did I know that my decision would lead me into a nightmare. The first few guests were uneventful. They paid in cash and left without any trouble. But then one particular guest arrived late at night with no reservation and insisted on staying regardless of what I told him. He was tall, dark-haired man, wearing an old black trench coat, and he had an aura that just made me feel uneasy from the moment he stepped through the door. Despite every fiber of my being telling me not to let him stay, something compelled me forward, and before long, I found myself leading him up the stairs towards his room for the night. It felt as if there was someone else in our presence, someone watching us silently from within each shadowed corner along our journey upward, until we eventually reached his room. The man opened his suitcase, revealing several strange items, including vials filled with unknown substances, candles inscribed with ancient symbols, and bones tied together with string. Without saying another word, he settled into bed for the night, leaving me wondering what he had planned. I stayed awake most of that night, listening closely for any sound coming from upstairs. I could hear chants and murmurs coming from his room. I didn't want to say anything, though, at the thought of him leaving a negative review, so I left him be. That's until 3 a.m. came. I heard a loud scream coming from his room. I had no choice but to go check it out. When I knocked on his door, he didn't answer, so I grabbed my key and opened it up, and the only thing that was left behind was a pentagram on the floor, and the man was nowhere to be found. I was home alone for the night while my roommate went to visit their parents. I had no plans other than to binge watch a new show on Netflix and to eat snacks until I passed out. I was getting everything together, wine, snacks, blankets. As soon as I turned on my TV, I could hear something coming from inside the house. I ignored it at first, but it kept happening. I assumed that I left my keys in the dryer, but on my way to the laundry room, I heard that the sound was coming from above me. The sound came from the attic. It was a strange noise, like metal grinding against metal. I had no idea what it could be, and I found myself standing frozen in place at the foot of the staircase that led up to the dark abyss above my head. I pulled down the stairs, but I hesitated for a moment before finally gathering enough courage to make my way slowly up each step. As I ascended further into the uncertain territory, every part of me wanted to turn back as soon as possible and go hide somewhere safe. but something kept me going until eventually I had reached the top floor of my home. My heart raced with anticipation as I cautiously peered my head into the attic. To my surprise, there was nothing out of the ordinary, just some old storage boxes and furniture covered in dust from years past. But then something moved in one corner behind all those boxes, making an eerie creak sound if it were alive. I froze again, unable to move or speak, for fear of what beast may dwell within this space with me now. The only thing that kept me from running away was an even greater curiosity of exactly what made that noise earlier, so I decided to take one more step forward towards it instead. As soon as I did so, a large rat scurried across floorboards right at eye level. Its small eyes almost seemed human-like, and its claws scratched along wood as if it were trying to crawl its way out of the very same room. In shock, yet still determined not to flee blindly, thinking there must be more than meets the eye here, I took another few steps closer, until eventually coming face to face with none other than a giant black rat. He stood upright on two hind legs while holding onto a rusty old key between both front paws, instinctively reaching for it without giving any thought whatsoever. Suddenly time seemed to stop completely around us. His beady eyes locked onto mine with great intensity, until he finally said, "This key is yours. Unlock your destiny." And with that, he vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but silence behind him. I have no clue what was in that wine I was drinking, but I'm never getting another bottle again. I'd never heard of an Airbnb before, but I was desperate for a place to stay. It seemed like the perfect solution. Little did I know that when I booked my stay, it would be the start of an unforgettable story. The listing described the property as a quaint cottage on a remote island with breathtaking views. Yet when I arrived at the address, all I found was an old shack with boarded up windows and doors. The chill air made me shiver as I reluctantly stepped inside. It smelled musty and damp, as if no one had been there for years. I began exploring what felt like an abandoned home, until suddenly something strange happened. All the furniture started shifting around by itself. Startled by this unexpected development, I quickly ran back outside, only to find myself surrounded by foggy shapes that seemed to have come out of nowhere. As they approached closer and closer, their true forms became clearer. Ghastly figures dressed in ragged clothes. Ghosts, maybe. They spoke with voices that echoed through my head, demanding to know why someone dared trespass on their sacred grounds. However, before they could do any harm, another figure appeared among them. A woman, who looked almost human, but exuded otherworldly power unlike anything else on earth. It turned out that she was the owner of this cottage, though not quite alive or dead herself. She welcomed me into her realm with open arms, after explaining how many travelers before me had experienced similar occurrences at her home, and likely wouldn't remember it afterwards. She invited me to spend some time in her world, so long we respected each other's boundaries. Taking a deep breath, I accepted her offer.